Hi, I have been told I'm live. How are you? How is everybody today? My name's Chad Neufeld. I'm going to launch my presentation right now. I'm really excited to speak today. My talk is virtual experiences people show up for, virus or no virus. And I know that the virus is not probably the biggest problem in the world right now, but this is all about virtual experiences people show up for. My name is Chad Neufeld. Thank you so much, everybody, for having me, for showing up. I know for some people, we're right before lunch. For some people, we're after lunch. For some people, we're probably in the middle of the night. So thank you, wherever you are in the world, for joining me today. So agenda, number one, who I am. Really short part of the presentation because you don't care that much about that. Second, why. So we're going to get to the heart of great experiences online. After that, we're going to go into a few inspiring examples, so the what, and then we're going to just touch on where. So some free-ish or affordable places to host experiences online. All right. So me, Chad Neufeld. I work for a software company called Chaordix here in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And I am just a chronic face toucher, which is a problem that I have. When they told me that was when I was reading kind of guidance for coronavirus and COVID-19. It said, don't touch your face. And I was like, well, honestly, I don't know how this is going to go for me. But still alive, still kicking. When it comes to my community credentials, so to speak, started with leading student clubs in high school and university. I also started and led a corporate community of interest kind of right after school. I've been involved in industry associations for marketing and advertising. I ran internal communications for a political group, political organizing up here in Canada. And then I currently sit on the board for a theater here in Calgary, and so I work in arts advocacy. So that is kind of a little bit of my community credentials outside of work. At work, the employer of me and the place that I'm sitting right now is Chaordix. So Chaordix has 10 years of experience building powerful community software. Our community platform is used by brands kind of all over the world to host communities for co-creation, for engagement, for insights, for user-generated content. Lego Ideas is the biggest, probably the biggest community hosted on our platform. There's 1.2 million people in there. It's really fun if you're looking for something to smile at. In the community space, Lego Ideas is a pretty wonderful and happy place. But our platform really allows you to host virtual experiences. So that's who pays my rent, and they're a wonderful company. But that's the end of talking about who I am or who I work for. The goal here is to create virtual experiences that people show up to and actually get value out of. So that's where we're going to spend our time. That's why I'm here. Where do you start? Well, you start with why. And I loathe that. It's not that I hate Simon Sinek per se. I think he's fine. I have nothing against the guy, but mostly hate the whole concept based on mostly people like myself who use it in presentations. So, and it's been 11 years since that talk. So I feel like we should probably move on as a team of people speaking about things. Unfortunately, he's absolutely right. It is really important to kind of start with the why behind your business. But it's about asking why you're in business, not kind of what your large metaphysical goals are. So Adam Newman, former CEO of WeWork, their why was to elevate the world's consciousness. And that is a why that I think is just a little too, it's a little too big. It's not really focused on what they actually do. And I mean, the former CEO. So really what we're looking for is in a practical sense, why does your organization exist? So what does the thing you sell help people achieve? So when you think about experiences, creating experiences for people, especially online, it's less about what you sell or what your organization is about, and it's more about what your organization helps people achieve. So that's really important to keep in mind. So first, you're asking yourself why you're in business. Second, you're asking yourself who your audience is right now. Who are the people that this event is actually for? Who's in your community? So maybe that's current users of your product or your service. Maybe it's future customers, people you want to use your product or service. It could be students, it could be industry thought leaders, it could be employees, it could be citizens in your community. So spend a little bit of time thinking about your audience or the subset of your audience that this event is for. So once you figured out is that big question, why you exist, but what value are you bringing? And once you've figured out who you're bringing that value to, it's important to, what you do next is then translate that value into a virtual experience for that audience. And so I know that there's a lot loaded into that one sentence. It's not as easy as just like, oh, here's ideas. And so what I want to do is next dive into some practical examples of how people have translated their value into online experiences. Now, I also have this kind of 6 different genres of virtual experiences, and I'm going to be doing a workshop after this talk where we're going to practice using those kind of 6 different genres, and so we'll dive into that a little bit later. So stick around. But right now, what I like to do is just share some examples of how people are translating their value into how they're translating their value into a virtual experience for an audience. So some of these might feel pretty familiar. I know they're not just a local thing up here in Canada. I'm sure these are happening all over the world, but in this case, a coffee shop, Monogram, wonderful coffee here in Canada. What they did was they took to Instagram and did Instagram live sessions, walking people through how to home brew excellent coffee. In this case, they're teaching people about an AeroPress. On the right, we've got a pretty famous chef teaching people how to kind of make the most out of things that have been kind of sitting in their fridge a little bit. And you can see that people are really tuning in, they're asking questions and they're participating. So again, you're seeing people go, okay, what is the value that I offer here? Well, the value, it's not about selling a bag of coffee so much as getting somebody caffeinated, or it's not about, I can't welcome people to my restaurant right now, but I can teach them how to make world-class food at home with things that are already in their fridge. Another example, local gallery here in Calgary, Herringer Kiss. What they've done is they've given the opportunity to all of the artists that they represent in their gallery. See, touching my face already. They have given them the opportunity to create original art for the time that we're in, and they the show in isolation, and all of these different pieces can be their Creative Commons. They can be downloaded and remixed and reused, and so it's an interesting way when they now we're starting to open up galleries so people can come back. But at that point, a few weeks ago, people couldn't go to galleries and they wanted to expose people to art. They wanted to challenge people with art. So this is how they did it. And they just spun it up as kind of like a little microsite. Glenbow Museum, local museum here in Calgary. They did Glenbow from home hashtag. And what this specific experience was a virtual tour of a treasure trove of women's hats from 1940 to 1970. And so they had a manager, Daryl, the manager of collections at the Glenbow, walked users through the history of these hats. And so in kind of regular times, you would probably have an audio tour, or maybe there was a guide that would take you through the museum and talk to you about some of these things. Glenbow recognized that they needed to, the value they were offering was exposing people to pieces of history that they might not be exposed to otherwise. And so they said, we can do that. We can do that online, and we can bring kind of joy and inspiration and insight to people from anywhere. This was one of my favorites. May have seen this. A wildlife sanctuary for a really reasonable fee was renting out goats and llamas to spice up Zoom meetings. And so you pick a time and you give them the Zoom link. And then in the middle of your stand up, your Friday stand up, all of a sudden there's a llama in the meeting. And they also were offering virtual tours of their sanctuary. And so if you think about the value that this sanctuary is creating, which is essentially, I mean, practically what they're doing is they are giving goats and llamas and some other types of animals a space where they can heal and can be safe, and they needed to, but they're also joint mandate is to introduce people to wildlife in this beautiful place. And so they said, well, we can raise some money to support our work and pay for whatever llamas eat, and we can also by charging for the service, and we can bring joy to people's. I mean, we've all been in probably way too many Zoom meetings. I haven't been in one with a llama yet, but that would be memorable. So we can really spice things up for people, and we can introduce them to this place and take them on a tour and kind of pull them out of their houses or their offices where they're kind of stuck, and hopefully get them out of that rut. This was an Airbnb experience. You could take an online tour through Prague with a plague doctor. I think this is incredibly cool. It's a little bit weird and creepy, which I think is part of what makes it so cool. This is when Airbnb, their whole mission is giving people the opportunity to explore places that they might not otherwise be able to afford to travel through. And so you can feel like home wherever you are. And this is one way that they can kind of bring people into Prague, into this place that they would not otherwise be able to go to in a really really interesting way. Now, if I happen to live in Prague and that person walked down the street late at night holding a lantern, I know I would be absolutely terrified. But you know, hopefully after the second or third time, you would recognize that they were doing a thing, and you had nothing to worry about. Finally, field recording. So this is just actually a podcast of recordings in fields. And so it might sound kind of weird. Most of the podcasts I listen to have people talking and or music. This is just the sounds of quasi silence in places around the world. And this when I was creating this presentation, they had 8 ratings, and when I checked this morning, they had 40 something ratings. And so I mean, it's a small way to tell how many people are listening to this, but it's definitely picking up momentum. And I think that the value here that they're creating is essentially bringing people to the outdoors when all you're just stuck inside. And so again, it's an interesting way to experience part of the world. The world can be experienced in an audio fashion, and that's what they're creating here. And it's an interesting kind of online experience that they're giving people. So what I wanted to do as well, because those are some examples in mostly from kind of things that I've come across on the internet. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to kind of come up with some virtual experiences for people who are actually potentially watching this talk right now, or who are attending the conference, or are at least kind of in the ComChat Slack community. So I put it out there in the community questions channel, and a bunch of people got back to me. I apologize. I know a couple of people commented after I built this list of 5. I only had time for kind of 5 people. So I apologize. I'll come up with ideas for you anyways and message you. But these were 5, so I'm going to run through them. Erwin. Erwin works for our project called Sparkly. Sparkly is a really cool tool for Slack that allows people to get connected on a regular basis with other people within the organization who have similar interests. Really interesting concept. They're also soon launching a mentorship module. And so an online experience for Erwin and for Sparkly that I thought about was called a career pit stop. And so what you could do is have mentors volunteer for kind of advice shifts. And so you could have within your organization, and again, this would vary based on the organization somewhat, but you get people who are a little bit more senior in the organization, and you could come up with, say, 10 topics and have different mentors put up their hand and go, I'm willing to talk to people in the organization who are a little bit lower down in the organization, who are working their way up, about this specific topic. So maybe it's about career advancement, maybe it's about adult education and continuing education, maybe it's about presentations. It could be about anything. It could be about personal finances. It could be about anything. Having specific mentors sign up for those different shifts, and then giving the rest of the workforce the ability to have one-on-ones with people who are talking about those specific things. So when I was thinking about tools you could use, I'm sure there's some tools for say physiotherapists or hair cutting places, things like that, where you can set up people and give them times that people can schedule. Something like that might help facilitate that. So I thought that was a cool potential way to add value and introduce people to Sparkly. Tristan is at Testim, or Testim, and they are a test automation tool, so a software automation tool to run tests on your code. So I was thinking about that, and I took this a little bit literally, but you're looking for bugs, and somebody who studies bugs is an entomologist. So what if you were to create like a code entomology museum? Is what I was thinking about. Like what I'm imagining when you're in, say, like the reptile hut at your local zoo. Now, I would never go in there because I'm terrified of snakes, and there's always snakes in the reptile house. But you know what I mean? You have like this like case of bugs, and you've got this plaque on the side. It's got a picture of the bug and talks a little bit about it. What if you could create something like that for some of the most common or most interesting bugs that your software finds on a common base, on a regular basis? What if you were to create a little microsite that was essentially like a zoo or a museum, and you could do audio tours? So not only do you have a visual, like here's an illustration of what this bug might look like if it was an actual bug. Here is the problem in the code, and you can click with SoundCloud or something like that, have an audio tour where one of your engineers talks about this specific bug. Now, not a coder, there's probably a lot of problems with this specific idea, and the software devs at Chaordix will flag those issues with me later, I'm sure. But I thought that could be a really cool thing. Francis is with Techeria, really amazing community supporting Latinx developers. And what I thought they could do, they're looking when Francis reached out, they were mentioning that they were interested in doing something for Pride Month, and I was like, what? I spelled your name wrong in this presentation. I apologize. But what about a Techeria's Got Talent show? And you don't have to do this live. This could be you give your community members a period of time to submit their talents, and then you run it as a YouTube live where you've got some commentators, kind of almost America's Funniest Home Video style, talking about the different talents. I thought that could be a really fun thing to do with the community. Super lighthearted. I think it could be really interesting. John is one of the key members of Yen. They're building a lightweight community software tool that can fit really nicely into your website. John is involved in a ton of stuff, so definitely check out Yen. They've got a whole like workshop and all this stuff. It's very cool. But what I thought about when I was thinking about an event or an experience online for John was what is called crit. And so if you've gone to art school, I have not, but I have a bunch of friends who have. And I watched some talks on this. A crit is basically you put your piece up on the wall, and the teacher and the other students kind of stand around it and talk about what they see in this, and what could be better and what was done really well. What if, John, you took people through a community crit? And so walking through communities you've built, walk through maybe some popular communities online, and talk about the things that they're doing really well, talk about the things that they could potentially do better. I'm seeing it as a screen share, a live stream, essentially walking through and taking people through different communities, and answering questions and providing feedback. I think a community crit could be a really interesting online experience. Francisco, Portuguese travel tech. This is my favorite idea that I came up with. Not to toot my own horn, but I think this is interesting. I'm calling it the dossier. So Portuguese travel tech. I think there's about 70 members. They're working on really establishing Portugal as this kind of travel tech haven, this place where travel tech is really cutting edge. But you know that there are around the world, there are other areas that are either trying to get really good at travel tech or who are already there. So what I was thinking is you could assign members different travel destinations, so either countries or specific areas, and then every week one member would essentially bring back intel and present to the group their findings. So dig into what Banff is doing. Dig into this, dig into what Banff is doing with their travel tech. Banff is just like really close to where we are here in Canada, so that's why I'm using that as an example. But bring back what you've learned to the group and inspire conversation among your community. So those are just some ideas. Hopefully those got you thinking. But the internet can be a really exciting place to launch virtual experiences. And it's all about figuring out the value that you're bringing, figuring out your audience, and then coming up with some really interesting ways to provide that value to people. So they're going to so that they show up, for that event, whether there's limitations on travel or not. So just quickly, I know I'm running low on time, and I will have a workshop. So we're going to talk more about some ways to get your brain working further. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about some places that I know of to host these online experiences. Obviously, live streams, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram are really great places to host that. Lots of people are already there, and they've got some powerful tools for that. For conferences and events, obviously Zoom and Hopin. We're at Hopin right now. Whereby and Remo are two other ones. David Spinks at CMX has done some really great work to highlight and basically give you a whole package for running these conferences and events, and the technology that you can use to do that. So definitely check out CMX, CMX Media, for some more information there. For community, obviously Slack. Most of you are probably here because of the ComChat Slack, which is fantastic, and props to the folks who are running that. Mighty Networks is also a really good one. Both of these tools can be really affordable. Tribe is another tool up here in Canada for an affordable, really kind of bare bones basic forum. And then if you want to maybe invest a little bit more in an enterprise grade tool, you should talk to us at Chaordix. For games, Kahoot is really cool. Netgames.io, a really awesome way to create fun experiences. Same with Scriblio and GeoGuessr. These are just a couple examples of just a couple examples of online tools that you can use to kind of create some fun with people in your community. E180 has brain dates. This could be another way to facilitate the career pit stop that I talked about earlier. SoundCloud and Medium, again, a couple other platforms that are really cool tools that you could use. So I recognize that I'm really low on time, so we're just going to quickly run through a summary. Number one, think about how you add value and what you actually help people achieve. Consider who your audience is right now. Who are the people that you want to attend, and how your value is impacting them right now. And then translate your value into an online experience in an online space. So again, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk right now. I know there's probably a chat going right now. I'm presenting, so I can't see that chat, but I'm going to pop in there in 1 second to take questions. But first off, thank you. Secondly, I am going to be running a workshop where we're going to kind of hopefully come up with some creative ways for you to come up with online experiences based on that framework. But before we do that, I would love to just take maybe 1 or 2 questions. So I'm going to stop screen sharing right now, and I'm going to flip back to the event chat. But wondering if anybody's got a question, and I'll take kind of one of the questions right now before we flip over into the workshop. Oh, hey, Jacob. Okay, so let's see if I've got a bunch of people just talking about Lego, and Lego's amazing. I've got a bunch of it right here. Okay, just a bunch of chat about Lego. I love that. Anybody got any questions that I can answer right now? Okay. I know Jacob's popping in here. We're going to switch over to the workshop portion of the session today, and I'm definitely hoping that you are starting to think about some ways that you can starting to think about your why, so we can come up with some experiences for you. Jacob, how are you?
Hey, Chad, can you hear me okay?
I can absolutely hear you.
Perfect.
So what I'm going to do, Jacob, is I'm going to, hopefully you can stay on here while I flip over to screen share. And I'm going to take everybody through a couple more slides. And then we'll start hopefully helping some people tackle this. I've got a dice app. Dice are involved in this next portion. But first I'm going to start with just a couple more slides. So first off, thank you. If anybody missed my presentation, I'm sure there are recordings. We're going to move into the workshop of the session. So we are going to get practical. This is the workshop portion of the talk that I just did. I'm going to keep on rolling. I'm going to take 1 second to just take a quick drink of water. And agenda, we are going to focus on translating your value into an online experience. So if you're still with us, if you've been with me for the last half hour, we walked through a number of, first we talked about value, then we talked about your audience, and then we talked about the translating the value for that audience into an online experience. Now, the translation part, I think, is the hardest part. It's also the most interesting part. So what I've done is I've come up with a framework that I think could help you do that translation. First, we're going to touch on the value. Second, we're going to move into the translation. And then hopefully at the end, we're going to have some questions that we can answer. So when it comes to value, a few kind of simple questions that you can be asking. So number one, why are you here? Why do people hit buy or subscribe or join? What does the thing that you sell or your community or organization, what does it help people achieve? And then why is your thing more effective than the alternative? So what I'm hoping is that we can hopefully grab a volunteer from the chat, and we can get your why. That's what I'm hoping we might be able to do. Is there anybody who might be willing to share their why with us today? Maybe Jacob, why don't we, while people think about that, why don't we, and I'm putting you on the spot here, but you're with ComSoar. What is ComSoar's why?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chad. The big why behind what we're building at ComSoar, I'd say, is it just has to do with the fact that we see a future where organizations are going to be increasingly moving the community function to the center and making it the core operation that touches every piece of the business, right? So whether that's customer success, customer support, marketing initiatives to drive new customers, and kind of any and all the above, community driving product feedback. So the overarching mission and the why is to help organizations become community driven. And part of the challenge today, and why sometimes that isn't the case, is because they lack the tooling to make data informed decisions. So that's hence the data management and analytics component of the ComSoar platform that we're building. So by enabling community teams and community managers with enhanced information to make more informed decisions, we're helping them move communities to the center and become overall more community driven. So that's kind of our why and the way in which we think about the world.
I love that. I think that's awesome. I also think it's very important. So thank you for doing that work on behalf of all community professionals. So Jordan Crawford, thank you for putting your hand up. The why for Jordan: to help direct mail professionals network and learn from each other. Okay, so we're going to start with Jordan. We're going to use you as an example. So direct mail professionals network and learn from each other. So I'm going to flip back to my slides. So let's do some translation for that why for Jordan. Okay, so how do we do that translation? Like, if you're sitting there and you're going, what can I do for direct mail professionals? What can I do to kind of add value to their lives? And so when I was thinking about kind of the different genres that different online experiences fall into, there's kind of six that came to mind. And so what I think we should do is, I've got this dice app, and we're going to roll the dice, and then we're going to riff on whatever it lands on. We're going to come up with an experience for Jordan for their community. So, but before we do that, I want to touch really quickly on what these six are. So number one, first thought. So what is the standard way that in your specific area, in your industry, what do kind of online experiences look like? Typically, a lot of times it's exactly what I did earlier. It's a person says hello, they present 20 minutes of content in the form of slides, and then at the end of that, they answer some questions. So that's kind of first thought, standard structure. So I challenge you to think about like the best version of a presentation you can do. I think that pulling in examples of community members and hopefully coming up with experiences for them, that would be an example of how you can take a kind of standard structure and hopefully add a little bit of creativity in there. So that's number one. That's translation number one, is first thought. So that's kind of the boring, the standard. Number two is transport. So how can you break down the walls? What is essentially a behind the scenes kind of event? Like, what can you do to transport people from wherever they are into the world that your organization adds value to? So that's transport. And the Airbnb experience with the Prague Plague Doctor tour, I would say that's a pretty killer example of transportation. Number three is improv. And so this is where you run an event that has very loose structure. This is where you're going, okay, we've got a couple people here. We've got a loose structure, some things we want to cover, but we're going to just go for it. And so one example of improv that came to mind when I was thinking about this, I don't know if you guys have played the Wikipedia game, but it's essentially you read a Wikipedia article and you click on the first blue link that you don't know anything about. So if you're reading an article on the Russian Revolution, for me, it'd probably be the first or second link because I'm not really good on my Russian history, unfortunately. But follow that, and then so you click over to that Wikipedia page and you read down until there was another thing you didn't understand. And so essentially, it takes you into this whole wormhole of really cool. You're just going down the rabbit hole further. So that's an example of kind of an improv event, but you can do a lot of different stuff in that kind of genre, that translation. Number 4 is asynchronous. And so a lot of times events, the default is live, but when you think about and say an art festival, for example, I know in Calgary they do a photography festival every year. People make contributions over the year and then they display them for a period of time. So that's asynchronous. You're assembling contributions over time and then releasing it to people and allowing them to participate. Number 5, probably the most fun translation I called kitsch. So this is game shows, this is speed dating, this is anniversaries, this is just coming up with something. The Techeria's Got Talent, that's an example of kitsch. And then finally, number 6 is hands-on. So this is where pros or teams tackle real challenges live. So this is often you're giving people an opportunity to go, okay, these are the 5 things that are the biggest challenge for me, or this is the 5 or 6 things that I struggle with, and kind of going to your community, gathering up that intel, and then kind of coming up with some, okay, this is what we're going to tackle today. From 1 till 2, we will be addressing this challenge. We've got 2 people who are really knowledgeable about this area. We're going to walk you through, we're going to share our screens, we're going to walk you through how we've tackled this. So that's hands-on. So those are 6 translations. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and we are going to roll this dice for Jordan. Jordan, you are number 6, number 7. No, you're number 6. So hands on. So for your organization, you are all about direct mail professionals. So I don't know the direct mail space really well, but what you could do, Jordan, is you could go, okay, this is a problem that people are having in the direct mail world. Let's break down that specific problem and show you the step-by-step how we solve that. So finding a member in your community who's really, really good at solving that one specific problem could be a really interesting kind of online experience. Jacob, you got any thoughts about kind of that hands-on experience that you could create for Jordan?
Yeah, I think it definitely makes sense to start with a pain point, right? And figure out, okay, what are the different tactical ways that we can bring this to life, and almost like work backwards, right? Reverse engineer.
Yes.
Come up with some sort of solutions in the past, like reverse engineer, like, okay, this is the pain point, bring it all the way to the solution, and do something very hands-on in the middle to bring it to life. And you're right, I don't know the direct mail marketing or direct mail industry as well, but maybe it could be something as simple as like, hey, this is the way in which you design a campaign from end to end, right? Like, here's how we identify all the different target people that should receive a postcard. Here's the way in which we go about crafting the collateral. Here's the type of data that we input into it. Here's the data sources that's feeding into that. Oh, here's the actual supplier that we use to automate and distribute this thing. And then here's the way in which we're tracking success. Like, maybe walk them through the entire value chain, do an example.
Totally. I love that. I think there's there's like a whole sphere of YouTube that is just people sharing their screens and teaching you how to do specific things. Maybe that's like setting up Google Analytics, but there will be everything from the 2-minute video version of that to the 25-minute video version of that, where you're walking through the specifics of like creating an event in Google Analytics, for example. And hundreds of thousands of people will watch that, and they'll be able to do that thing based on that. So what are the things in the direct mail world that are kind of the stumbling points? And how can you go, okay, what's our audience here? Our audience here, maybe they're not people who have been in this space for 10 years. Maybe they're people who are new to direct mail. What can we teach them? How can we create like a deep dive hands-on experience for that specific group?
Exactly. It's all about showing cool. how the sausage is made, right?
Exactly. Okay, cool. Next one up on the chat is Marissa. Hi, Marissa. So Marissa's why: to help teachers connect and learn from one another, to build their confidence in teaching STEM, hands-on learning. Okay, so I've got my dice roll again. I can just shake my phone, and we've got 2. And so I actually need to quickly, 2 was, let's go back to our slides here. 2 was transport. So 2 is all about breaking down walls. Okay, so how can we break down some walls and between teachers so that they can be more confident teaching STEM? I'm wondering if one of the ways that you could do that, and again, this is all off the top of my head, so who knows if it's good, but I think one of the best ways that you, if you're trying to teach something to a class, for example, one of the best ways that I think you could learn or create confidence in yourself would be seeing how other teachers have taught that subject to their classrooms. So wondering if in your community you could have volunteers record their lessons teaching that specific thing and create almost a kind of a video vault. Here is 30 examples of people teaching this specific thing. And so over time, you could build that library, and you could professionals. We talked a little bit about a crit in the last, so critiquing almost. You could have people go through and go, okay, so we're going to cover 3 of these lessons, and we're going to highlight all the things that were amazing, and then all the things that we think could be done slightly differently, and then essentially take those lessons and allow people to go, okay, I understand what makes up a really great STEM lesson, and I understand what I should maybe change or factor into mine. Thoughts on that, Jacob? Any thoughts on kind of breaking down the walls and transporting people via online experience?
Yeah, I like that idea of creating almost like a video library or backlog of content, real life experiences, and that you approach it from the classroom perspective angle. But I think to break down the walls even further, I'll leverage something that we were chatting about in an earlier session with Marcia, where they have community organized events where people share stories of failure and things. So maybe it could be a way to get recordings of different community members that are these teachers sharing times that they went through challenges or screwed up. Like get really raw emotional content and coalesce it all into a library that people can consume and watch and realize, wow, I'm not just the only one facing these challenges and pain points. Like there are others that are willing to share their stories, and I think that's ultimately going to make the community open up even more and really break down kind of the walls and the social norms that generally prevent people from wanting to share those types of things, or at the very least being afraid to talk about them.
I love that. I think it's really fun, the idea of kind of almost like a fail fest. Like, here are the things that I did that were not great tools for teaching STEM. This wasn't a great way. And we can learn from those, and we can become more confident. That's a really cool idea. I like that a lot. Okay, so next person here, Megan Ponce de Leon. The why for you: to help people learn and speak German, Spanish, French, or English. Okay, so we're going to shake the dice again. And it's 2. Let's shake it again because we already chatted with 2. We already did 6. Come
We're
on.
getting bad luck today. Oh man, I think your dice is broken. There we go.
3. Okay, cool. Yeah, maybe I got a rigged dice app from the App Store. Okay, so let's just hop back to our slide here. So 3 is improv, a space to explore and experiment. Okay, so what if you were to actually just do like improv with people who are kind of at a similar stage in that language? Now, that could be a horrible idea, but it would be very funny for people to do improv. But you could do kind of an online, if everybody was on a Zoom call, designate people and go, okay, so this is the story. Let's have a conversation in French, where you're kind of inventing these characters and stuff like that. That could be kind of one type of event. I'm also thinking when we think about improv, kind of again allowing you to have an event that kind of has a really loose structure. Could you bring people on a this is combining a couple ideas, but a lot of museums are doing these kind of tours through and showing you like different exhibits and kind of walking through these different exhibits. What about going and doing one of these tours kind of as a community, doing one of these tours through a French museum? And so you're going through this museum and you're listening to somebody talk in French, and you're probably not picking up everything, but again, it's unstructured. You don't really know what's going to happen. You're kind of touring through this museum, and you're learning a bit about in French about things in this French museum. That's kind of off the top of my head how you could apply improv to kind of that kind of why for Megan. Any thoughts, Jacob?
I don't know if I have anything explicit to add, but that museum tour idea is really fascinating. And I've seen entire companies now that that believe that the future of travel is going to be virtual reality based, and that people won't spend $5,000 on a lavish trip to Rome to view all the museums. They're just going to swipe their credit card, pay $250 and do a VR experience from their couch to see the Colosseums and all these beautiful landmarks. So I can totally see that being very effective to help some of these language learners get a real immersive view of what the culture is like and what the language is like and how it's being used in a real context. And also the other thing is that as human beings, we're very visual learners, right? And oftentimes the language learning programs I've done, for example, a lot of it is it's text-based, it's flashcards. There are some video components, but I think seeing it and breathing it and just being very, very improv, if you will, could be super beneficial. So that sounds like an awesome thing to explore. And I don't know any particular services that do that or particular museums, but Chad, maybe you want to follow up with Megan afterward if you have anything that you know of.
For sure, yeah, and I have done no tours through any German museums yet, but I'm sure they exist, and I'm sure they could be. I think it'd be a really fun way to do that. So hopefully that was an interesting idea, Megan, or at least got you thinking. Okay, let's see. Francisco helped create the path and put tools available for startups and founders to lead their startups to success. So I know there's a ton of community dedicated to kind of supporting entrepreneurs and startups and founders. And there's a lot of kind of online events for that. Let's see if we can come up with another one for Francisco. See if we can get a 4. Yeah. Okay. So 4. We have not got a 4 yet. Let's quickly flip back here and dive into 4. So 4 is asynchronous. So contributions assembled over time. So when we're thinking about tools for startups or founders for leading their startups to success, what I find really valuable is when I kind of come across a posting or an article or a video that is about a specific stage in a startup's life. And so obviously that a lot of times it's about the stage that you're in at the time, but it could be about the next stage and how can I think about what what are the things I need to be thinking about now so I can prepare for that next step? So when I think about kind of something that's asynchronous and kind of an experience, I'm wondering if what you can do is essentially build a like a timeline for, and you can take so from very first, like I had the idea and I wrote it on a napkin, to maybe it's hired the 100th employee or something, whatever that kind of endpoint is. But basically create that timeline, and then have different members of the community kind of share their experiences at those different stages, and essentially create this like this kind of this timeline that people can go, okay, I know where I'm at. Here's 3 articles for this kind of period, and it's all very visual. It's on this linear path, and you're able to kind of pop in and read about something that's really that other people have experienced kind of in that time frame. That's what I think a really cool kind of asynchronous event could be. What are your thoughts, Jacob?
I absolutely love that, and I think it applies, to much more than just startup and founder communities. Going from idea on napkin all the way to different milestones. And that's great. But I think that could be applied to any other community as well. Like I noticed that I see Adil, he's from the Demand Curve, their growth marketing community. I guarantee you, they could create something very similar where it's like, hey, this is the journey of a growth marketer, from the first time they broke into the field all the way to different milestones. And, they ran their first, paid campaign, or learned this skill, or did this and that. So I think that type of collaborative timeline approach can be very valuable. And something we were talking about in an earlier session was about the journey of a community builder, right? And how a lot of people that are in this space, or that are community managers or community professionals today, they weren't very purposeful in the way in which they started out. They just accidentally fell into the role. So I think doing something like that, to say, hey, like we want to peel back the onion on the journey that it took from people, finding their way into the space all the way to different career milestones and things like that. So I think
I love that.
Applying this timeline approach to many other different types of communities and industries and roles could be a fascinating thing.
Awesome. Very cool. Okay, I think that's all the whys that we had in the chat. So, and I know we just have a few minutes here, but wondering if opening the floor here, if anybody has any other questions about kind of translating kind of value into an online experience. Jacob and I are happy to take any of those questions for sure. Jacob, do you have any questions for me? I know that we've been kind of chatting here this whole time, but from when it comes to kind of, this is obviously a massive online experience that you guys are hosting right now. It's kind of meta to be talking about online experiences in the middle of an online experience, which is essentially what we're doing now. But when you guys were thinking about this community chat summit, what were some of the questions that came up for you, and kind of how did you answer some of those things?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest questions was, how do we make this feel like it's not just a string of webinars, right? And I think engaging in an interactive session just like this is the epitome of figuring out how to do just that. So that was one of the big things. And the other thing is replicating a lot of the nuances of an in-person event is challenging digitally, right? Like there's this,
totally.
You go to an in-person conference, there's the opportunity for serendipity, in the sense that you can step out and you can go into a hallway, you can meet random people. So when we were designing this event, we were very much looking for a platform that would allow us to, capture some of that serendipity. And that's one of the reasons why we chose Hopin. They have this virtual networking feature where if you go on the left side panel, if this is left, I don't know if I'm on the left or on the right, networking, I think we'll have one in a few hours. If not, there's 2 more tomorrow, where you can get randomly with people to try to introduce some of that serendipity. So that was something we were very much looking out for when designing this event.
I think it's awesome. I think you guys have done a terrific job. And it really is. I mean, I've been going to conferences for years, and that it's really the people that I've met some of the coolest people in the world, literally just standing next to another. In this case, I was standing next to, I think it was Adrian from Vanilla, and we were just chatting about technology, and we ended up chatting with Lola, who runs a community of like over 1 million people called Finn. They're one of Facebook's most successful groups, and we chatted for like 5 hours after that. And we talk on a somewhat regular basis. I'm like helping her with a website. Like these are the things that happen at conferences, and so it's great that you're starting to do that. Other conferences are starting to do that, and there's tools now that help you facilitate that, because I don't think there would have been anything that can do it in the way that that this tool does. Any final questions from anybody in the chat before we let you guys go? It's tough again because like you can't see anybody like put their hand up, but okay, cool.
Feedback loops are just a little bit different on virtual.
It's true. It's very true. Okay, cool.
Well, it looks like there's no more questions, or we'll see. I think we're good to go. So Chad, this has been an absolutely incredible session, both sessions, I guess. So we very much appreciate you coming on and giving us so much of your time, and we look forward to the next session, Jono. And if you want to keep up the conversation with Chad, you can head over to the Slack community, which we'll link down in the comments below.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Jacob, and the whole team at CommChat. And I can't believe I'm right before Jono, but thanks for putting me as the opener for Jono. But I'm looking forward to sticking around for that and for the rest of the summit.
Yep. Perfect.